CreepyCorner stories.
Hey everyone, welcome back to CreepyCorner stories. You know, diving into the dark web is always risky, but sharing these stories with you makes it worth it. I'm curious, where are you watching this from right now? Let me know in the comments below. I've noticed that these kinds of stories hit differently depending on where you are. It might even make the experience a little creepier. So, tell me, are you watching from the safety of your home or somewhere less secure? As a kid, my best friend said it's easy to get away with murder. I found out on the dark web he wasn't boasting, and now I'm worried. I don't know why I'm even posting this. Maybe I just need to get it off my chest. Or maybe I want someone to tell me I'm overthinking everything. But after what I saw, what I found out, I can't ignore it anymore. So, let me start at the beginning. I grew up in a pretty normal town, just outside of Chicago. You know, suburban life, cul-de-sacs, strip malls, late-night McDonald's runs, and that weirdly empty Sears nobody went to. My best friend back then was a guy named Ethan. We were inseparable, like the type of kids who'd get mistaken for brothers even though we looked nothing alike. I was the quiet, slightly nerdy one, and Ethan was, well, Ethan, loud, funny, always getting into trouble. And he had this thing about murder, not in a creepy serial killer way. At least I didn't think so at the time. He was just obsessed with it. When we were around 10, he started talking about how easy it was to get away with murder. He'd bring it up randomly, at sleepovers, walking home from school, even in the middle of watching YouTube videos. He'd say stuff like, "Dude, if you plan it right, nobody will ever catch you." Or, "People are dumb. Cops are dumb. You just have to make it look like an accident." At the time, I thought it was just Ethan being Ethan. We even turned it into a game. Perfect crime. We tried to come up with murder scenarios that couldn't be solved. You know, kid stuff. Poison someone's drink at Starbucks and leave before they realize. Push someone off the train platform in downtown Chicago when it's crowded. Things we thought were harmless, but Ethan took it way more seriously than I did. I remember one time we were hanging out in his basement, scrolling through Reddit threads about unsolved cases. He turned to me, grinning like he had the biggest secret in the world. "You ever heard of the dark web?" I had, obviously. Every kid who spent too much time on YouTube knew about it. The place where you could buy anything, drugs, fake passports, even hitmen. But we were just kids. It wasn't like we could actually get on there. At least that's what I thought. Fast forward a few years, and Ethan and I drifted apart. It wasn't anything dramatic. We just went to different high schools, made new friends. I stopped thinking about our perfect crime game. Stopped thinking about the weird way he used to talk about murder until a few weeks ago. That's when I found out what he'd really meant. And now I wish to God I hadn't. It started with a stupid Reddit thread. A few weeks ago, I was up late, scrolling through r/unresolved mysteries. Just one of those nights where you go down a rabbit hole of creepy stories, right? I was reading about this guy who vanished from a Walmart parking lot in Texas. No security footage, no witnesses, just gone. The comments were full of conspiracy theories, cartels, human trafficking, even government experiments. Then I saw a reply that gave me chills. Some people don't disappear. They're made to disappear. It was an anonymous account, barely any post history, but something about it felt off. I don't know why, but I clicked on their profile. One post, one single post, in an obscure subreddit I'd never heard of before. r/lesser known dark web. The title, The True Perfect Crime. And the second I read the first few lines, my stomach dropped, because it was word for word something Ethan had told me when we were kids. People don't think about the in-between spaces, the highways, the truck stops, the places where cameras don't reach. If you grab someone there, they just stop existing. I felt this weird, creeping sickness crawl up my spine. It wasn't just similar, it was exactly what he used to say. Even the way it was written, that cocky, matter-of-fact tone. There was a link at the bottom, a Tor link. Now, I'm not an idiot. I know the dark web is full of scams and nightmare fuel, but something about this made my hand shake as I copied the link. It wasn't curiosity. It was something worse. Recognition. I downloaded Tor, got a burner VPN, and followed the link. It took me to a black web page with nothing but a play button. No text, no descriptions, just a single, pulsing white play button in the center. And like an idiot, I clicked it. It started like a home video. Shaky, handheld footage of a gas station at night. The timestamp in the corner read, October 22nd, 2023, 3:14 a.m. The location? Interstate 80. That's what made my breath catch in my throat. I-80 runs straight through Illinois. I've driven that highway 100 times. The camera panned slowly, almost like the person holding it was scanning the area. You could see the empty parking lot, the flickering neon sign that barely lit up the pumps. The only person there was a woman, maybe mid-20s, filling up her car. She looked tired, like she'd been driving for hours. Then, from behind the camera, a voice whispered, "Watch this." My stomach twisted. I knew that voice. I knew that voice. Ethan. The camera moved closer. The woman didn't notice. The person holding the camera crept forward, step by step, until they were standing right behind her. Then, bang! A sharp, metallic sound rang out. The camera jolted as something heavy cracked against her skull. She collapsed instantly, her body hitting the pavement like a puppet with its strings cut. 1 second, she was standing there. The next, she was nothing. My whole body locked up. I wanted to stop watching. I wanted to close the tab, delete everything, pretend this never happened. But I didn't. I couldn't, because the video wasn't over. The person behind the camera grabbed the woman's arms and dragged her toward a nearby semi-truck. The way her body flopped, completely limp, made my stomach turn. I could see blood spreading across the pavement from where she'd hit her head. They threw her into the back of the truck. The camera lingered on her for a second, like they were showing off. Then, the camera tilted up, revealing the inside of the truck. And that's when I saw them. Other people. There were at least 4 others inside, curled up in the dark, like broken dolls. A man, an older woman, and 2 teenage boys. They weren't moving. Some were breathing, but barely. The camera zoomed in on one of the boys. His face was swollen, his lips split open. His hands were zip-tied in front of him. He looked straight into the lens. He wasn't scared. He was empty. Then the camera turned back around, and for the first time, I saw him. The person holding the camera. Ethan. His face was the same, but older. His messy brown hair, that stupid scar on his eyebrow from when we tried to jump our bikes off the Walgreens parking lot ledge. His eyes, though, his eyes were dead. He smiled. Told you it was easy. The screen went black. I don't remember closing my laptop. I don't remember getting up or running to the bathroom or throwing up until my throat burned. All I remember is the feeling, like my body wasn't mine anymore, like the world wasn't real. Ethan, my Ethan, was gone. Whatever he was now, whatever he turned into, it wasn't human. And then, the worst part, the notification, a new email, no subject, no sender. I clicked it with shaking hands. There was only one sentence. You were always smart, but not as smart as me. My vision blurred. I tried to tell myself it wasn't real, that this was some kind of horrible mistake. But then, another email popped up. This time, with an attachment, a photo. I forced myself to open it, and that's when I stopped breathing, because it was a picture of me, taken from outside my bedroom window. My body wasn't mine anymore. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I just sat there, staring at my laptop screen, trying to make sense of the impossible. The picture was fresh, too fresh. I was in it, sitting at my desk, looking right at my screen. The glow from my monitor washed over my face. I could see my own expression frozen in time, my lips slightly parted, my eyebrows drawn together in confusion. It had been taken seconds ago. Someone was outside my house. Number, not just someone. Ethan, my childhood best friend. The kid I used to sneak out with to buy shitty gas station slushies at 2 a.m. The kid who taught me how to throw a punch in his backyard. The kid who spent years telling me, murder is easy. And now, I knew he wasn't just some kid running his mouth. He was proving it. I forced myself to move, my body stiff and trembling as I reached for my phone. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but who the hell do you call when your childhood best friend, a goddamn serial killer, is standing outside your house? The police. What the hell would I even say? Hi, yeah. So my old friend from middle school just sent me a snuff film and a picture of me sitting in my room. I think he's going to kill me. I'd sound insane, but the alternative was doing nothing, and I wasn't about to let Ethan make me disappear like that girl at the gas station. I dropped to the floor, crawling toward my bedroom window on my hands and knees. My fingers twitched as I slowly, so slowly, lifted one of the blinds, just enough to see outside, and then I stopped breathing. The street was empty. No cars, no people, just the soft, orange glow of the streetlights stretching over the pavement. My front yard looked the same as always, but my brain knew something was wrong. I scanned the area, my pulse hammering in my ears. Every bush, every shadow. I half expected Ethan to be standing right there, smiling that dead-eyed smile from the video, holding up his phone like he was about to take another picture. But he wasn't, at least not that I could see. I forced myself to breathe, pressing my forehead against the window pane. Maybe it was a sick joke. Maybe he wasn't really out there, just screwing with me from miles away. And then, a flicker of movement near the sidewalk. My stomach twisted as I focused, my vision adjusting to the dark. There was a car parked across the street, one of those old, windowless vans, the kind you joke about being used for kidnappings. And inside it, someone was sitting in the driver's seat. I couldn't see his face, but I didn't have to. It was him. I stumbled back from the window, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. My vision swam. What do I do? What the fuck do I do? My phone buzzed. I nearly screamed. I looked down. Another email. No subject. No sender. Just 2 words. Run now. I moved without thinking. My legs were still shaking, my body still numb, but the survival part of my brain kicked in. I grabbed my keys and my wallet and bolted, my bare feet slamming against the cold tile as I sprinted for the front door. The second I turned the handle, I heard it. A car door opening. I didn't look. I couldn't. I just ran. Barefoot, wearing nothing but basketball shorts and a t-shirt, I ran down my street like a lunatic, my skin prickling with a feeling of eyes drilling into my back. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I needed to get the fuck away. Behind me, an engine roared to life. I swerved into someone's backyard, cutting through bushes, jumping over a chain-link fence that ripped into my shin. I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. My lungs burned, my vision blurred, but I kept moving. And then, the van's tires screeched, somewhere behind me. Close. Too close. I ducked into another backyard, nearly tripping over a sprinkler. My neighbor's house was up ahead, lights on, TV flashing through the window. I ran for their door like my life depended on it, because it did. I slammed my fist against the wood, gasping, choking on my own breath. "Open up! Please!" Footsteps pounded behind me. A shadow stretched across the porch, and just as I felt someone grabbed the back of my shirt, the door swung open. Mrs. Landry, my next-door neighbor, an old lady in her 70s with a Boston Terrier tucked under one arm and a kitchen knife in the other, her face twisted in confusion and horror. "What the hell?" I shoved past her, slamming the door shut behind me. I turned. My heart felt like it was about to explode out of my chest. Ethan was gone. Mrs. Landry called the cops. I barely managed to get words out, but they came, took my statement, asked me a million questions, checked the security cams down the street, but the van was gone. No plates, no clear footage, nothing. And Ethan, it was like he'd never been there at all. The police didn't believe me. Not really. They filed a report, but I could see it in their eyes. The doubt, the suspicion. Some paranoid 20-something, claiming his old childhood friend, had suddenly turned into a murderer. I tried to show them the emails, the video, but they didn't take it seriously. The video link was gone. The emails, deleted, like they'd never existed. But I know what I saw, and I know one thing for sure. This isn't over. Ethan was always smarter than me, always one step ahead. He wanted me to see that video. He wanted me to know what he was capable of. And most of all, he wanted to play. Because this isn't about murder. Not for him. This is about the game. And I just became his favorite opponent. I haven't slept in 3 days. Not really. Every time I close my eyes, I see that van. I see Ethan's face, staring at me through the darkness. That same smug grin he used to have when we were kids. Except now, it's twisted, empty. I hear the girl's skull cracking against the pavement, hear the lifeless breathing of the people he locked in that truck, waiting to die. And worst of all, I hear his voice. Run now. It wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. Because Ethan isn't trying to kill me. Not yet. He's making me play. And I have no choice but to play along. I spent the first night at Mrs. Landry's house, my entire body still shaking from adrenaline. I told her everything, at least the parts I could explain without sounding insane. She let me sleep on the couch, but I barely closed my eyes. Every sound outside made my skin crawl. Every car that passed sent a fresh wave of panic crashing through me. By morning, I had a plan. I wasn't going to stay here. I packed a bag, fast, grabbed my laptop, my wallet, some clothes, and my dad's old hunting knife. I I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. I didn't call my parents. I didn't text my friends. If Ethan was watching me, I didn't want to give him anything to track. I took an Uber to O'Hare Airport, not to fly, just to disappear for a while. Airports are perfect for that. Thousands of people moving in and out, no way to track someone who isn't using their real name. I spent the entire day there, bouncing between terminals, switching between Wi-Fi networks, trying to figure out my next move. I thought I was safe. I thought I was smart. But then, at exactly 3:14 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text message. No number. No contact name. Just 2 words. Nice try. I nearly dropped my phone. My entire body went cold, the air around me turning suffocating. My mouth felt dry, my pulse hammering in my ears. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the crowd. Hundreds of people, all moving in different directions. Businessmen in suits, moms wrangling toddlers, a group of teenagers laughing near a Starbucks. Which one of them was him? Which one was watching me? I took a shaky breath and backed away, forcing myself to move casually. If he was here, if he was watching, I couldn't let him know I knew. I found a bathroom and locked myself in a stall, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I opened the text, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I wanted to reply. Who are you? What do you want? But I didn't, because I already knew. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into the dark web. I needed answers. I don't know if you've ever really been on the dark web. I don't mean the fake stuff you see in YouTube videos. Red rooms, hitman services, obvious scams made to scare idiots. I mean the real dark web, the forums, the places where people trade information, the places where you find things you aren't supposed to see. I searched for hours, followed old breadcrumbs, found forums that shouldn't exist. I dug into every sick, twisted corner of the internet, trying to find anything that could tell me what Ethan had become. And then I found it. A private forum. No name, no description, just a single thread at the top, posted by a user with no profile picture. The title, The Game. My throat tightened. I clicked it. Inside was a set of rules, and the second I read them, I knew. This was what Ethan was playing. The rules of the game. The game has already started. You do not get to choose when. If you are reading this, you are already playing. You have an opponent. They have chosen you. They have studied you. They know everything about you. You cannot quit. There is no way to leave the game except to win or to lose. There are only 2 ways to win. Kill your opponent. Make them kill themselves. There are infinite ways to lose. If you involve the police, you lose. If you try to run, you lose. If you tell anyone, they become a player too, and they will lose before you do. You will receive messages. These are clues. They are also traps. Your opponent is always watching, always listening, always one step ahead. You will know when the game is over. Nobody has ever won the game. I felt like I was going to throw up, because this wasn't a theory. This wasn't some creepypasta. This was real, and Ethan had been playing for a long time. I slammed my laptop shut, my hands shaking violently. My entire body was drenched in sweat. My stomach churned. I could barely breathe. This wasn't just some twisted revenge. This wasn't just Ethan screwing with me. He was making me his next opponent. And I couldn't run. I couldn't hide. I had to play. Or I had to die. I took a deep, shuddering breath and stared at my phone. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Then finally, I typed my reply. Okay, let's play. 15 seconds later, I got a response, not a text, a live video. I hesitated, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then, slowly, I tapped the screen. The video loaded instantly, and what I saw made my blood turn to ice. It was my apartment. Live footage, taken from inside my bedroom. The camera was shaking slightly, like someone was holding it. I could see my desk, my chair, the unmade bed, but someone was sitting in it. A person, not Ethan, someone else. They were tied to the chair, blindfolded, their heads slumped forward. I could see the rise and fall of their chest, still alive. And then, behind them, the door creaked open. A shadow moved across the floor, and Ethan stepped into frame. He lifted something in his hand, something sharp, something metallic, a knife. And then, the video ended. I stared at my screen, my entire body frozen in horror. And then, another message popped up. Just 4 words. Your turn to play. I should have known it would come to this. There's no happy ending, no way out. I was never meant to survive. The second I read those rules, I understood. This isn't about running. This isn't about winning. It's about breaking me, tearing me apart piece by piece, until I either give in and become like him, or I die. And Ethan is very, very good at what he does. My phone buzzed again. Another video. I didn't want to open it. I already knew what I'd see. The blindfolded person, the knife, Ethan's dead, empty grin. But I didn't have a choice. I pressed play. The camera was closer this time. The person in the chair was shaking. I could see their fingers twitching, see the muscles in their shoulders tensing, trying to brace for whatever was about to happen. The sound of slow, measured footsteps. Ethan stepped into view again, and when he did, my breath caught in my throat, because I recognized the person in the chair. It was Derek, my coworker, my friend, the guy I grabbed beers with after work, the guy who let me crash at his place when I got too drunk one night. He had nothing to do with this, but that didn't matter, because now he was playing too. Ethan crouched beside him, tilting his head like he was studying an insect. He spoke, and I swear to God, he was talking to me, even though he was staring at Derek. You don't get to run, man. You don't get to hide. You either play, or people start dying, one by one, until you get it. He lifted the knife. My stomach turned. I could barely think. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped my phone. I wanted to scream at him to stop, but I knew Ethan. I knew him better than anyone, and I knew what he wanted. He wanted to see how far he could push me before I snapped, before I cracked open and became just like him, before I started playing the game his way. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to breathe. Think. If I ran, Derek would die. If I told the cops, he'd die. If I did nothing, he'd die. There was only one option, the one Ethan wanted. I had to fight. I wasn't stupid enough to go straight to my apartment. I knew Ethan wouldn't be waiting there. He was too smart for that. But he'd have something set up. Cameras, traps, a backup plan. But Ethan always had one weakness. Me. He thought he was in control, thought he was untouchable, thought he was still the one calling the shots. He was wrong. I knew how he thought, and I knew how to beat him. It took me 2 hours to get what I needed. Another burner phone, a police scanner, a stolen car. Messy, risky, but I didn't have a choice. I left my real phone in a locker at the airport. If Ethan was tracking me, he'd follow the wrong trail. Then I drove straight to my apartment complex, not to my unit, to the one next door. It was empty, had been for months. The landlord still had the keys, but I didn't need them. The lock was old, weak. One good kick, and I was in. I moved fast, cut through the empty living room, climbed onto the kitchen counter, pushed up the ceiling tile, just like we used to do as kids. When we were 12, Ethan and I figured out we could crawl through the ceiling of my old house. The tiles popped right out, and there was just enough space to wriggle through. We used to spy on my dad that way, sneaking into the hallway to listen to his phone calls. I was betting Ethan never thought I'd remember that. And I was right, because when I slid through the ceiling and lowered myself into my bedroom, I saw the camera right away. A tiny blinking red light, mounted in the corner, aimed right at my desk. I grinned. Got you, motherfucker. I moved like a ghost, silent, careful, my heartbeat slamming against my ribs. I picked up my old laptop, the one Ethan had hacked into, and I waited. 40 minutes passed before I heard the door creak open. Slow, careful. Then, footsteps. He was here. I held my breath, pressing myself against the wall, barely daring to blink. Ethan moved into the room slowly, like he was expecting something. I saw his silhouette against the dim glow of my monitor. And then, I struck. I moved fast, faster than he expected. I tackled him from behind, driving the knife straight into his shoulder. Ethan barely made a sound, just a sharp inhale, like he was surprised. We crashed to the floor. I yanked the knife free. Blood sprayed across the carpet. For the first time in his life, Ethan was the one losing, and he knew it. We fought, hard. I don't remember most of it, just flashes. Ethan's fist slamming into my ribs, my knife slicing through his hoodie, cutting deep. The sound of his breath hitching, the way his body jerked when I finally got him on the ground, and then the knife at his throat. His eyes locked onto mine. I saw something flicker in them, not fear, satisfaction, like he'd been waiting for this, like he'd wanted me to do it. And that's when I understood. The game wasn't about him winning. It was about making me lose. If I killed him, I'd be just like him. A murderer, a player, another piece of the cycle, another name in the game. And that was the real goal. It had never been about him surviving. It had been about turning me into him. I pressed the knife harder against his skin. And then I whispered, "You lose." I pulled back. Ethan stared at me, eyes dark and unreadable. Then slowly, he smiled. "Guess I do." Then, before I could stop him, he slit his own throat. I don't remember much after that, just the blood. The gurgling sound as he choked on it. The way his body twitched before it finally stopped moving. I stood there for a long time, staring at him. Then, finally, I picked up my phone and dialed 911. The end. The cops never found proof of Ethan's crimes. The van was gone. The videos, deleted. The dark web forums, vanished. No fingerprints, no ID, nothing. Ethan wasn't real anymore. He had erased himself, just like he'd erased all the others. But I know the truth. I know what he was, and I know the game isn't over, because the last message I ever got, the one that showed up right after Ethan died, was from an unknown number. Just 2 words. New opponent. I don't know who they are. I don't know where they are. But I know this. The game never ends. My friend ordered a timeout doll from the dark web, and we found it at our local playground. It's freaking us out. Alright, so before I get into this, I just want to say that I knew this was a bad idea from the start. Like, from the second my friend Jason told me he was gonna do it. I had that gut feeling, you know, the kind you get when you're about to do something really stupid, but you go along with it anyway because, well, you're an idiot. Jason's the kind of guy who's always looking for weird crap online. I'm talking about those shady Reddit threads, Telegram groups, all that deep web nonsense. I usually just brush it off because, whatever, it's his thing. But then, a few weeks ago, he hits me up all excited and tells me he found a site selling haunted timeout dolls. Now, if you don't know what a timeout doll is, let me paint a picture for you. They're these old school dolls that are designed to look like kids standing in the corner, like they're being punished. You can't see their faces because they're turned away, and for some reason, old people love collecting them. I remember seeing them at flea markets and antique shops when I was a kid, and they always creeped me out. Jason told me this site was selling authentic paranormal objects, and that every doll came with a story. I laughed it off at first, thinking it was just some eBay scam, but he swore it was legit. The site had this blacked out aesthetic, like something straight out of a horror movie, with one of those enter at your own risk banners. He said they had a whole section for cursed dolls, and that's where he found ours. Now, here's where it gets weird. Jason didn't just buy the doll, he had to bid on it. Apparently, this site had live auctions for haunted objects, and people were actually fighting over them. Some of the dolls were going for hundreds of dollars, but the one Jason got, it had one bid, just one. The description was short, basically just handmade timeout doll, found in abandoned church basement. Do not face it towards a mirror. Do not speak to it after midnight. Do not leave it unattended in a playground. That was it. No history, no backstory, nothing. And the best part, Jason won the bid for $10. Now, I don't know about you, but if I see something labeled, do not leave it unattended in a playground, the last thing I'm gonna do is hit buy now. But Jason, oh, he loved it. Said it was the best $10 he's ever spent. The confirmation email he got was super weird too. No tracking number, no estimated delivery date, just a single line. Your item will find you. Dude, I swear, I wanted to shut my laptop and pretend this conversation never happened. But Jason, he just laughed, said it was all part of the experience. That was 2 weeks ago. We didn't think much of it after that. Honestly, I kinda assumed it was a scam and that Jason had just wasted $10 on nothing until yesterday. Because yesterday, we found the doll at our local playground. Alright, I don't even know how to explain what happened last night. I've been sitting here for hours trying to process it, but the more I think about it, the worse it gets. I can't stop shaking. I haven't slept. I don't even think I can sleep after what we saw. I'm not saying this to be dramatic. I'm saying this because if I don't write it all down now, I'm scared I'll convince myself it was just some messed up nightmare. But it wasn't. It was real. And I don't think we were supposed to find it. Jason and I had completely forgotten about the whole time outdoor thing until last night. It had been 2 weeks since he placed the order, and nothing ever showed up. No package, no email update, nothing. So, we just figured it was a scam. Then last night, we were at the playground by Jason's house. We weren't supposed to be there. It was almost 1 a.m., and the place was completely empty. The streetlights were buzzing, casting these long, weird shadows over the swings and slides. It was that kind of night where the air is too still, too quiet, like the world is waiting for something to happen. We were just messing around, sitting on the swings, scrolling through TikTok. Jason was watching some dumb video about those urban explorers who break into abandoned places, and I was half listening, zoning out. That's when I noticed something off. There was something standing by the jungle gym. At first, I thought it was just a kid, a little boy maybe, facing the slide like he was about to climb up. But something about him wasn't right. He wasn't moving, just standing there, completely frozen. I nudged Jason. "Dude, do you see that?" Jason looked up from his phone, squinted, then went totally still. I could hear his breathing change. That's when I realized it wasn't a kid. It was the doll. The same Time Out doll from the website. The one Jason ordered. It was just there, standing in the middle of the playground, facing the jungle gym, with its hands pressed against the side, like a child being punished. Only we didn't put it there, and no one else was around. Jason shot up from the swing so fast it creaked. "What the actual—" "I don't know," I whispered, my stomach twisting. "Dude, I don't know." We didn't move. We just stared. The doll was wearing old, dusty clothes, faded blue overalls, and a white, long-sleeved shirt that looked wrong somehow, like it didn't belong to this time period. The fabric was torn in some places, stained dark in others, and then there was its head, a smooth, bald scalp, with strands of what looked like real human hair stitched into the top. And the hands. God, the hands. They weren't made of porcelain or plastic. They were soft. Too soft. The fingers had dirt under the nails, and the skin looked stretched, like it had been pulled over a frame that was just a little too big. Jason let out this nervous laugh, but it was shaky, forced. "All right, who's messing with us?" I didn't answer, because I was looking at the footprints. The playground was covered in that soft, rubberized flooring they put in to keep kids from cracking their skulls. It had rained earlier, so the surface was still damp, making it easy to see any disturbances. There were no footprints leading to the doll. None. It was just there, like it had appeared. Jason was already pulling out his phone, probably to take a picture, but before he could open the camera, something moved. Not the doll, the swings. Every single swing, including the one I had just been sitting on, suddenly creaked and started swaying back and forth. At first, I thought it was the wind, except there was no wind. The trees weren't moving. The air was still, and yet the swings were rocking harder and harder, chains rattling, until they were jerking violently, like something unseen was sitting in them. Jason cursed under his breath. "Dude, what the hell?" I was this close to running. I don't care if that makes me sound like a coward. Every nerve in my body was screaming at me to get the hell out of there. But Jason, of course, Jason had to be Jason. Before I could stop him, he took a step forward and grabbed the doll by the shoulder. The second he touched it, I heard something. A click, like a camera shutter, but not from Jason's phone. It came from inside the doll. Jason froze. "Did you hear that?" I couldn't even answer because suddenly the air around us felt wrong. It was subtle at first, like when you walk into a room and realize someone's been there just a second before. But then it got worse. The streetlights flickered. The air turned heavy, pressing against my skin like we were being pulled underwater. The temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath. And then the slide creaked, slowly, painfully, like something invisible was climbing up. Jason must have felt it too, because he let go of the doll and stumbled back. But the second his hand left its shoulder, the doll's head twitched, just a little, just enough for us to know it happened. We ran. We freaking ran. I don't remember getting back to Jason's house. I don't remember anything except the cold sweat dripping down my back, my heart slamming against my ribs. We didn't stop until we were inside, door locked, blinds shut, gasping for air. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, Jason broke the silence. It followed us. I looked at him. What? He turned his phone around. The screen was still open to the camera. The last photo taken. It wasn't a picture of the doll. It was a picture of us, taken from behind, like something had been standing right there in the playground, watching us. I don't know how to explain what happened after we saw that photo. I really don't, because no matter how I try to make sense of it, no matter how many times I replay it in my head, none of it should be possible. None of it should have happened. But it did. And now, Jason is missing. After we saw the picture, neither of us moved for a long time. We just sat there in Jason's room, staring at his phone, like it might somehow explain itself if we waited long enough. But it didn't. It just sat there on the screen, clear as day, a photo of us from behind, taken from a few feet away, taken from the playground, taken by something that wasn't there. Jason's hands were shaking so bad he almost dropped his phone. I wasn't doing much better. My whole body was numb, that kind of numbness that happens when your brain just shuts off because the only other option is pure panic. Finally, Jason swallowed hard. We didn't take that. No, there was no one else there. No. So, we're not talking about this. I cut him off. We're done. It's just some weird glitch. Some creepy dude messing with us. Whatever. We're done. Jason didn't argue. He just nodded, put his phone down, and we never spoke about it again. Or at least, we tried. But it didn't let us. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing the doll, standing there in the playground, frozen, waiting. My brain kept trying to tell me it was just some stupid prank, that Jason and I had overreacted. But then I'd hear the click, that camera click, and I'd be wide awake again. The next morning, Jason didn't text me like he usually does. No, dude, that was crazy message. No jokes about how we should go back and see if it moved. Nothing. I tried to convince myself he was just tired, or embarrassed, or maybe he just didn't want to talk about it. Then, at around noon, I got a text from Jason, but it didn't make any sense. It was just a picture. I stared at it for a long time, trying to understand what I was looking at. It was dark and blurry, but I could still make out what was in the frame. Jason's room, but not how I remembered it. It was trashed. His blankets were on the floor. His desk was knocked over. His closet doors were wide open, like someone had been looking for something. And in the middle of it all, standing in the center of the room, was the doll, facing the corner, like it had been put there, like it was in timeout. I felt my stomach drop. I tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried again, and again. Nothing. That's when I knew something was wrong. Really, really wrong. I biked to Jason's house so fast, I nearly wiped out 3 times. His front door was locked. So I rang the doorbell, waited, rang it again. His mom answered. She looked off. Her face was pale, her eyes dark, like she hadn't slept. I barely got the words out before she cut me off. Jason's not here. I blinked. What? He left this morning, she said, rubbing her temples like she had a massive headache. Didn't say where he was going, just left. His phone's still here too. That didn't make any sense. Jason was glued to his phone. He wouldn't even go to the bathroom without it. There was no way he just left it behind. Can I see his room? I asked. His mom hesitated, then sighed and stepped aside. When I walked in, my stomach turned. It was exactly like the picture he sent me. Blankets on the floor, desk knocked over, closet doors wide open. But the doll was gone. That's when the real nightmare started. I didn't know what to do. I mean, what the hell was I supposed to do? Call the cops and say, hey, my friend ordered a haunted doll off the dark web and now he's missing. No one would believe me. No one would understand. I needed proof. I needed to find Jason. So I went back to the playground. It was late afternoon by then, and there were still a few kids running around, parents chatting on benches. Normal, safe, nothing like the night before. But then I saw it, sitting at the very top of the slide. The doll. Its back was to me, hands pressed against the side, exactly like before. Like it had been put there, or like it had come back on its own. I felt my whole body go cold. My brain screamed at me to turn around, to go home, to pretend I never saw it. But I didn't. I walked right up to it. I don't know why. Maybe I thought if I touched it, it would be just a doll. Maybe I thought I could prove to myself that it was all in my head. But the second I reached out, it moved. Not its body, not its head, its hand. It grabbed my wrist, and it squeezed, hard. Its fingers felt wet, sticky, like they had been dipped in something thick, something warm. I yanked my arm back and stumbled away, heart slamming against my ribs. And that's when I saw its feet, Jason's shoes. I ran. I ran so fast, I don't even remember getting home. I locked my doors, shut my blinds, sat on my bed, and stared at my hands, at the faint, reddish stains the doll had left on my skin. And then, my phone buzzed. A new picture, from Jason's number. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped my phone when I opened it. The picture was dark, but I could still see what it was. A corner, a room, and standing there, pressed against the wall, was Jason, hands at his sides, face turned away. Like he was in time out, like he was becoming the next doll. Jason is gone. I don't mean missing. I don't mean he ran away. I mean he's been taken, and I don't think I'm going to see him again. At least, not in a way that I'd recognize. Because I know what happens now. I know what the doll really is, and I know who made it. After I got that picture of Jason, standing in some dark, unknown corner, his face turned away. I sat there, staring at my phone, unable to breathe. My body felt frozen, but my thoughts were screaming. I wanted to tell myself it was fake, that Jason was messing with me, that this was some elaborate prank. But then I looked at the timestamp, 3:12 a.m. That was impossible, because I got the message at 3:07 a.m., 5 minutes before it was taken. I swear to God, I felt something shift in the air around me, like something had just caught up, like something was here. I shot up from my bed so fast, my vision went black at the edges. I locked my door, turned on every light I could, and sat there, staring at my phone, waiting for it to make sense. It didn't, but I knew one thing for sure. Jason was in trouble, and I had to find him. I tried calling his number again, but it went straight to voicemail. No surprise there. I scrolled back to the picture and forced myself to really look at it. It was dark. The only light source came from a single flickering bulb, casting long, warped shadows along the floor. The walls were old, rotting wood and peeling wallpaper, and there were these deep, dark stains along the baseboards. The floor was covered in dust, and yet there were footprints, not Jason's, small ones, like a child's, like something had been pacing in circles around him. I felt sick. My head was pounding, my vision tunneling. But then, something clicked. The wallpaper, it was familiar. I had seen it before. My breath caught in my throat, because I knew exactly where Jason was. There's an abandoned house on the edge of our town. Every city has one. The kind of place that everyone knows about, but no one talks about. Ours is an old, crumbling Victorian at the end of a dirt road, hidden behind overgrown trees. It's been there for as long as I can remember, rotting away in silence. People say weird stuff about it, that it was a funeral home back in the day, that a family died inside, that someone still lives there. I never believed any of it, until now, because the wallpaper in Jason's picture, it matched, and the dusty footprints circling around him, I had a feeling I knew who they belonged to, or rather, what. I should have called the cops. I should have told someone, but I didn't, because deep down, I knew no one would believe me, so I went alone. The second I stepped onto the property, I felt it, that pressure, like the air was heavier here, like something was watching. The front door was unlocked. It swung open with this long, aching creak, revealing nothing but darkness. The smell hit me first. Rotting wood, mold, something faintly metallic. I took a step inside. The floorboards groaned under my weight. My phone flashlight cut through the dark, revealing a narrow hallway lined with old, faded pictures. My stomach dropped, because they weren't just random portraits. They were children, lined up along the walls, their faces blurred, except for their eyes. Every single one of them had been scratched out. I swallowed hard and kept moving. The house was too quiet. No wind, no outside noises, just the sound of my own breathing, too loud, too fast. And then, a click, a camera shutter. I froze. My whole body locked up. It came from the room ahead of me, Jason's room. I forced myself to move. Step by step, I reached the doorway and shined my light inside. And I saw him. Jason was standing in the corner, his back to me, his arms stiff at his sides, his head down, like he was in time out. Jason. My voice barely came out. He didn't move, didn't acknowledge me. I took a shaky step forward, and that's when I saw them, lined up along the walls, dozens and dozens of dolls, all of them in the same position, backs turned, faces hidden, but their hands were real, pale, withered, fingernails cracked and caked with dirt, or maybe blood. My stomach lurched. I forced myself to look away, forced myself to focus on Jason. I reached out, touched his shoulder. His skin was cold, like he had been sitting there for days. I swallowed my fear. Jason, we need to go. Nothing, not even a twitch. I turned him around, and I wished I hadn't, because his face was gone. His eyes, his mouth, his nose, all of it smooth and featureless, like a doll's head before it's painted. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what was inside his mouth. A small, old-fashioned camera lens, sewn into his skin, pointed directly at me. A click, a flash, and everything went black. I woke up outside, flat on my back in the dirt, the sky stretching endlessly above me. The house was gone, like it had never been there, like it had never existed. Jason was gone too, and in my hand, a new doll, dressed in the same clothes Jason wore the night we found the first one. I didn't move. I couldn't, because as I stared down at it, I realized something. It was warm, and it was breathing. I don't remember how I got home. I don't remember walking or running or even moving. The only thing I remember is the feeling of something breathing in my hands. The doll. Jason. If it was even him anymore. By the time I came to, I was standing in my bedroom, the door locked behind me, the window shut. I don't remember doing any of it. I don't even remember getting inside. The doll was still clutched in my hands, still warm, still rising and falling, like lungs struggling for air. I should have dropped it. I should have thrown it, burned it, smashed it, anything. But I didn't, because something about it, something about him, kept me frozen. The overalls, the shirt, the slight scuff on the side of his sneaker from when he tripped over a curb last summer. It was Jason, or at least it had been. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually my legs gave out. I sat on my bed, my hand still gripping the doll's fragile little body. That's when I noticed it. The stitches, running down his arms, across his stomach, like something had been sewn into him, or like something had been taken out. My fingers trembled as I traced them, as I felt the delicate threads keeping his tiny form together. Then, with a slow, painful realization, I knew what I had to do. I had to open it. I don't know why I did it. Maybe because I still believed Jason was in there somehow. Maybe because I had to know. Or maybe because something wanted me to. I grabbed a pair of scissors from my desk. My hands were so unsteady, I could barely hold them. I brought the tip to the stitches, and I started cutting. The moment the thread snapped, the room changed. The air turned thick, heavy. The lights dimmed without actually flickering, like something was pulling the energy from the air. But I kept going. Thread by thread, I unraveled the doll, and with every cut, I heard something move. Not in my room, not in my house, behind my walls. A slow, dragging sound, wet, sticky, wrong, like flesh being pulled across wood. I could feel it listening, waiting. I swallowed back the nausea clawing at my throat, and finally, the last stitch came loose. I opened the doll, and inside, I saw his face, not stitched on, not painted. Jason's real human face, shrunken, pressed against the fabric, his mouth stitched shut from the inside. His eyes moved. I screamed. I dropped the doll and stumbled back, my vision blurred with panic, my heart slamming against my ribs. But I couldn't look away, because Jason was trying to talk. His lips, still sewn, were moving underneath the thread, and then I heard his voice, inside my head, a whisper. Run. The second he said it, something slammed against my door, hard. The entire frame shook. I spun around just as it happened again. Bang. Louder. Harder. The walls shuddered. My doorknob rattled. And then I heard it. The click. That same horrible camera shutter. Only this time, it wasn't coming from my phone. It was inside the room, behind me. I turned slowly, and in the mirror across from my bed, I saw it. A tall, hunched figure. Not quite human. Not quite anything. Its skin was stitched together, a patchwork of different people. Its arms were too long, too thin. Its fingers ended in long, broken nails, and where its face should have been was an old camera lens, pointed right at me. It tilted its head, studying me. Then, click. My vision blurred. My ears rang. The world tilted. And suddenly, I was standing in a corner, my back to the room, my hands at my sides, frozen. I don't know how long I was there. When I finally came to, my body was stiff, my throat raw, like I'd been screaming for hours. The doll was gone. The room was silent. But my phone, there was a new message from Jason's number. It was a video. I almost didn't open it. I almost threw my phone across the room, but my hands moved on their own. And the second I pressed play, I wished I hadn't, because the video was taken from inside the abandoned house. It was dark, the camera shaking slightly, like someone was holding it with trembling hands. And then it panned to a wall covered in dolls, lined up in rows, all of them real, all of them breathing. And then the camera zoomed in on the newest one, sitting right in the middle, dressed in my clothes, my skin, my face, pressed into the fabric, mouth stitched shut, eyes moving, watching, screaming. The video ended, and then a new text, just 2 words. Time out. I don't sleep anymore. I don't turn my lights off. Every night, I feel it watching, waiting, and sometimes, just before dawn, I hear it, the click, the camera shutter, getting closer and closer, because I know the truth now. I know what happens when you order a doll from that site. I know what happens when you touch it. It takes you, turns you into something else. And when it's done, it puts you back, neatly stitched, a new doll, waiting for the next order, waiting for the next friend, waiting for you. I am a dark web scientist. We found astronauts as volunteers, and we sent them to find out why the moon became dimmer in the night sky. We shouldn't have let them come back. Alright, before I even start, I just want to say, if this post disappears, or if I do, you'll know why. I don't expect you to believe me. Hell, I wouldn't believe me if I were you. But if you stick around, just hear me out. My name is Alex. That's not my real name, but I need something to go by. A few years ago, I was just another broke post-grad trying to scrape by in Los Angeles. I had a part-time job at a tech firm, barely covering rent, and spent way too much time doom-scrolling Twitter and watching weird YouTube videos at 2 a.m. You know, the ones with creepy AI-generated voices talking about missing people, unsolved mysteries, and the kind of deep web horror stories that feel just fake enough to be entertaining. Then, one night, I stumbled onto a Discord server. I don't even remember the link. Maybe I found it on some cryptic Reddit thread or one of those iceberg conspiracy charts. It was called the Looking Glass Project, a sleek black interface, members with usernames like KLSW20TH and Observer33, and this strange, formal pinned message that simply said, looking for science-oriented minds, high pay, discretion required, reply with credentials. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I replied. I was a data analyst with some background in physics, so I figured, worst case, it's a scam. Best case, a weird job that pays better than the garbage salary I was making. Within an hour, I got a DM from a user named Prime Node. You have potential. Join the call. There was a link to an encrypted Zoom room. My heart was racing as I clicked it. I don't know what I expected. Maybe some neckbeard larping about aliens or the Illuminati. But when the call loaded, I saw 6 people. They weren't what I expected. 3 men and 3 women, all looking professional, like actual scientists. One of them, an older guy with silver hair and the kind of face that belonged on a Forbes magazine cover, introduced himself as Dr. Keller. He was the only one who used a real name. What he told me sounded insane. "The moon is getting dimmer," he said, "not just to the naked eye, but in measurable, quantifiable ways. The data isn't public. NASA has been filtering it, but something is changing up there, and we need to find out why." I laughed. Like, full-on laughed. "So what? You want me to hack NASA?" Keller shook his head. "Number, we want you to help analyze the data and select a team for a mission." That's when he told me the real kicker. They weren't working with NASA. They weren't working with any government. This was a private operation, a dark, web-funded research group that had its own technology that apparently was decades beyond what the public knew about. And they were planning to send real people to the moon. It was insane. It was impossible. But they were offering me $500,000 just to be a part of it. So, yeah, I said yes. That was 2 years ago. Now, I wish I had never taken that call. I wish I had never met Keller. And more than anything, I wish we had never let them come back. I don't think you understand what I'm about to tell you. I don't think you can understand it. Because if you could, if you truly let yourself believe that something like this could actually happen, you wouldn't be sitting there so comfortably, scrolling through your phone in some brightly lit room. You wouldn't be sipping your overpriced Starbucks or half watching Netflix while skimming this post. You'd be looking at the moon, and you'd never, ever sleep again. They told me I'd be working in data processing. That was the first lie. After I signed the contracts, and by the way, you'd be amazed at how fast you stop caring about NDAs when there's a $500,000 advance wired to your account. I was flown to an undisclosed location. No joke. I got picked up in a black SUV in downtown LA, driven to an unmarked airstrip, and put on a private jet with blacked out windows. No phones, no internet, no way to track where we were going. When we landed, I stepped into a place that shouldn't exist. Imagine a research facility, but designed by someone who had way too much money and zero regard for human ethics. Concrete hallways, security cameras in every corner, reinforced doors that looked like they belonged in a bunker, and a smell, God, that smell, like antiseptic and something metallic, something wrong. The people there weren't normal either. They were scientists, sure, but there was something off about them. Their eyes were always darting around, like they expected something to jump out at them. Some of them had dark circles so deep it looked like they hadn't slept in years. Others had that weird, jittery energy, like they were trying to act normal, but couldn't quite remember how. And then there were the volunteers, 3 men, 2 women, hand-picked from a pool of ex-military, ex-NASA, and disturbingly, ex-prisoners. Yeah, you read that right. Apparently some of them were serving life sentences before they disappeared from the system. This wasn't a mission for heroes. It was a suicide squad. But they didn't care. Not after what they were promised. Because the people funding this operation weren't just rich. They were beyond rich. Billionaires so deep in the shadows, they didn't have faces, just initials. I heard names whispered in the halls. Corporations, secret government factions, even cults. And they all wanted the same thing, to know what the fuck was happening on the moon. The first time I saw the spacecraft, I almost laughed. It didn't look real. Sleek, black, like a bullet carved from some obsidian nightmare. It wasn't some tin can NASA rig. This thing was alien in design, like someone had copied UFO conspiracies and just made them real. I started to get this sinking feeling in my gut. This wasn't human technology. I don't mean that in a little green men way. I mean it in a we aren't supposed to have this way. In a someone found something they shouldn't have and reverse engineered it way. I asked Keller where the funding came from. He just stared at me for a long time, then said, "Some doors should never be opened, but once they are, someone has to step through." And with that, the countdown began. The volunteers suited up. No flag patches, no identification, no names. They weren't supposed to come back. And then we launched them into the dark. Here's the part that still doesn't make sense. They landed. We got telemetry data, vital signs, camera feeds. Everything was going perfectly. For the first 24 hours, it was normal. They set up base near the South Pole Aitken Basin, the farthest, darkest part of the moon. They collected samples, tested the soil, even joked around. One of them, Vega, that's what we called him, kept making dumb moon landing jokes. One small step for man, one giant leap for a dude with a death wish. The others laughed. We laughed too, watching from the facility. Then, on the second day, the feed glitched. Just for a second, a single frame drop. But when it came back, something was different. They were standing still, all 5 of them, frozen. Their suits were still receiving oxygen. Their vitals were normal, too normal. No fluctuations, no movements, just a steady, rhythmic pattern, almost like they weren't human anymore. Then the radio crackled. "We see it," Keller leaned in. "See what?" Silence. Then Vega whispered, "It sees us too." The video feed cut to black. Comms went dead. Vital signs? Still normal. For 6 hours, we sat there, staring at 5 motionless dots on the biometric scanner. No response, no movement, no sign of distress. Then, out of nowhere, they started moving, not walking, running, sprinting. Their vitals were off the charts. Heart rates at 200 plus. Oxygen levels dropping like they were suffocating inside their suits. They were screaming, but the audio wasn't working. We could see their mouths open, their bodies convulsing, and behind them, the shadows moved. I don't know how else to describe it. The darkness behind them, the parts of the moon that sunlight never touched. It wasn't just darkness anymore. It was shifting, spreading, reaching for them. And then, one by one, they disappeared. I wanted to be relieved. They were gone. It was over. The nightmare ended. Then, on the 7th day, the ship came back. We don't know who or what brought it back. There was no communication, no landing clearance. It just descended, perfectly, like it was being piloted by something that understood human technology better than humans did. The doors opened. The astronauts stepped out. At least, I think it was them. They looked the same, moved the same, spoke the same. But their eyes, Jesus Christ, their eyes. You ever look at a corpse, like an actual dead body? There's this emptiness, that hollow, glossy stare, where you just know there's nothing left inside. That's what they looked like, except they were still breathing. Keller ran tests, brain scans, psychological evaluations. Every test showed the same results. They were normal, but they weren't, because at night, the cameras caught them standing in their rooms, motionless, staring at the corners where the light didn't reach. Because they didn't blink. Because one of the researchers walked past Vega's room and heard something whispering his name from inside. Because when we checked the security footage, there were only 4 astronauts on board when the ship landed, but 5 walked out. The human brain has a defense mechanism. It refuses to understand certain things. It'll try to rationalize what can't be rationalized. It'll tell you you're tired, that you're seeing things. It'll filter out what it knows will break you. But sometimes, the filter doesn't work fast enough. Sometimes, you see it before your mind can protect you. And then, there's no going back. The security footage didn't make sense. We watched the landing again, frame by frame. The ship touched down at 3:14 a.m. The hatch opened. 4 astronauts stepped onto the platform, one by one. Vega, Remy, Carter, Singh. 4. Only 4. And then, a flicker, a glitch in the feed. A single frame where something else stood among them. Not a person. Not anything I can explain. It was black static in human shape. A silhouette that existed for just one frame. And then, in the next, Vega was stepping forward, and now there were 5 of them, as if it had always been that way. The timestamps never changed. The logs never showed an error. But we knew. We knew something stepped off that ship that wasn't supposed to be there, and we had let it in. At first, they acted normal. Keller ran the debriefing, checking for signs of radiation exposure, cognitive impairment, PTSD, anything that would explain what happened on the moon. The astronauts answered every question perfectly, too perfectly. It was like they had memorized the exact responses we expected. Mission duration: 6 days, 13 hours. Primary findings: soil samples confirm previous analysis. No anomalies detected. Visual observations: no significant deviations. Standard lunar terrain. Did you encounter anything unusual? Pause. And then, all 5 of them answered at the exact same time, in the exact same tone. No. That was the moment I knew. That was the moment we all knew. They were lying. Day 1. The base had an observation deck, one of those big, glass-windowed rooms where we could watch the astronauts in a controlled environment. It was supposed to be a precaution to monitor their reintegration before releasing them back into the world. They just sat there. They didn't talk to each other, didn't ask questions, didn't even seem curious about the tests we were running. They just sat in their rooms, staring, not at us, at the cameras, like they knew we were watching, like they wanted us to see them watching us. Day 2. Singh didn't blink for 6 hours straight. I timed it. Day 3. Carter stopped eating, stopped drinking, just sat cross-legged on the floor of his room, smiling at the wall. We tried to intervene, but his vitals were perfect. No dehydration, no malnutrition, as if his body wasn't obeying the rules of being human anymore. Day 4. Remy's voice changed. It happened during a psych evaluation. One moment, she was speaking normally. The next, she stopped mid-sentence. And when she spoke again, it wasn't her voice. It was her voice layered over itself, like multiple versions of her were speaking at once. Like something else was trying to learn how to use her throat. Day 5. That was the night the cameras glitched. The base had redundant power systems, full blackout protection. There was no reason for them to fail. But at 3:14 a.m., every feed cut out for exactly 13 seconds. When they came back, Vega was gone. The room was locked from the outside. No alarms, no forced entry, nothing on the footage. 1 second, he was sitting on his cot. The next, the feed flickered. and he was gone. Not missing, not escaped, just removed, like he had been edited out of reality. We tore that room apart. There was nowhere he could have gone. No vents big enough to crawl through. No loose tiles. No hidden doors. Nothing humanly possible. But something wasn't right with the others. They didn't ask where Vega went. Didn't even acknowledge he was gone. They just sat there, smiling. Day 6. We started hearing him. In the walls. A scratching sound. Inside the metal. Like fingernails scraping against the vents. Then whispers. His voice. Let me out. It's dark in here. Please. Keller ordered a full lockdown. We should have evacuated. We should have burned the whole goddamn facility to the ground. But we didn't. And that was our biggest mistake. Because at 3:14 a.m., the cameras glitched again. And when they came back, Vega was back in his room, sitting cross-legged on the floor, smiling, like he had never left. But he wasn't Vega anymore. His vitals were normal. His fingerprints matched. His DNA was perfectly identical. But the thing in that room was not the same man who had disappeared. His movements were too smooth, too calculated, like he had been studying human behavior instead of actually experiencing it. And his eyes were black, not the iris, the whole thing, like there was no longer a person inside him, just a mask pretending to be one. That was the last night Keller was seen alive. Security footage showed him entering Vega's room at 3:33 a.m. There was no struggle, no screams, just static. And when the cameras came back online, Vega was sitting there, alone, smiling. Keller was never found, and the door had never opened. We should have run. We should have locked those things inside and buried them beneath 1,000 tons of concrete. But we didn't, because the next day, Keller's voice came over the intercom, calm, collected. The astronauts have been cleared for release. Escort them to the surface. It was his voice, his exact voice, but it wasn't him. And I knew. They weren't going to let us leave. We should have never opened the doors. We should have never let them step onto our Earth again. But it wasn't our choice anymore. By the time we realized what was happening, it was too late. And now, you're all living with them. The intercom crackled again. The astronauts had been cleared for release. Keller's voice. But we all knew. Keller was gone. The security teams hesitated. Guns half raised, fingers hovering over the triggers. I saw the sweat dripping down their faces, the way their pupils flickered in and out of focus, like their brains were trying to reject reality itself. Because deep down, some part of them still wanted to believe this was normal, that the 5 figures sitting in their containment rooms were still human, that the past week had just been a series of malfunctions and stress-induced paranoia. But I knew better. I saw what stepped off that ship, and I saw the way Vega had come back. They weren't human anymore. They were just wearing human skin. The order came down. Release them. It didn't come from Keller again. This time, it was multiple voices at once. The command repeated itself over the speakers, over the radios, through the emergency alert systems flashing on every screen in the facility. Release them. Release them. Release them. Like an infection, spreading through every device, every frequency. A command that didn't come from any one person, but from everywhere at once. The guards didn't resist. They didn't even speak. They just walked to the containment doors and unlocked them. The astronauts stepped out. Or, the things inside them did. I swear to God, I could hear the sound of their bones shifting beneath their skin, not cracking, more like liquid cartilage, reshaping itself, adjusting to something that wasn't built for human anatomy. They walked perfectly in sync. Same stride, same head tilt, same eerie, unnatural grace, like they had spent a lifetime studying how humans moved, but something was just slightly off. Then, as they passed us, they started to change, not all at once, not enough to break the illusion, but just small, wrong details. Carter's jaw unhinged for a fraction of a second, stretching down past his collarbone before snapping back into place. Remy's left hand split open, revealing rows of tiny glistening black teeth where her palm should have been. Then the skin resealed itself, seamless, like nothing had happened at all. Vega turned to look at me, and his face wasn't his face anymore. It was mine. The base went into lockdown, not because we activated it, because the facility itself didn't want to let them out. The emergency shutters slammed down. The steel-reinforced doors sealed shut. The power surged, halting all external transmissions. Every single system designed to contain an outbreak activated itself. The facility knew. The building itself knew. But it wasn't enough, because the astronauts just stood there, watching us, waiting. And then, the lights cut out. We heard the first scream at 3:14 a.m. It came from the lower levels, then another, then a dozen more. The radios burst to life with panicked voices, security shouting, weapons firing, the gut-wrenching sound of wet, tearing flesh. Oh God, there. Static. Another voice, barely a whisper over the frequency. They're not in their rooms anymore. They're in the walls. They're in the fucking walls. Static. Then, silence. I don't remember running. I don't remember how I ended up in the control room with the last remaining survivors. But I remember looking at the security monitors, and I remember what I saw. The astronauts, if you could still call them that, were changing. Their limbs stretched, bending in ways that shouldn't be possible. Their faces split open, like something inside them was trying to push its way through. One of them crawled along the ceiling, its bones folding in half. Another just stood there, vibrating so fast it looked like the footage was corrupted, its body flickering in and out of existence. And then, they started mimicking us. I watched as one of them peeled off its own face, and underneath, Keller's face stared back at me. Another one twisted its body into the exact shape and posture of the security guard it had just killed, like it was learning, adapting. They weren't killing for food. They were replacing us. We had one last failsafe, a purge protocol, a last resort measure to burn the entire base to the ground, burying everything and everyone inside. It was our only chance, so I ran for the control panel. I made it 5 feet before I felt something breathe against my ear. A hand grabbed my wrist. I turned and saw myself staring back at me, smiling. You don't have to run. It spoke in my voice. You don't have to be afraid. I tried to pull away. It held tighter. Its fingers started to sink into my skin, merging, as if it was trying to pull me inside itself. And for a second, for a horrifying second, I felt myself slipping. I could feel my memories unraveling, my thoughts dissolving into its thoughts, my body melting into its body, like I had never been separate to begin with, like it was absorbing me, like it was becoming me. And then, the alarm screamed, the purge protocol activated, and the world exploded into fire. I woke up in the desert. I don't know how I got out. I don't know why I'm still alive, but the facility is gone. Nothing left but a crater. No reports, no news coverage, no investigation. It's like it never even existed, like we never existed. And the astronauts, they're gone too. But somehow, I know, they didn't die, they didn't burn, they just left. They walked right out before the flames could touch them. And now, they're out there, walking among us, waiting, watching, smiling. The human mind can only process so much horror before it starts to break. Some people go into shock. Some people just shut down. And some people like me, keep functioning, even when they know they shouldn't be alive anymore. Even when they know they saw something that should never exist. Even when they know the world isn't real in the way they thought it was. I should be dead. I was dead. But somehow, I woke up in the desert, miles away from the burning hole that used to be the research facility, alone. No burns, no injuries, nothing but my memories. Memories that I wish had burned with the rest of it. Because I remember what we let out, and I remember what it whispered to me before I lost consciousness. You can run if it makes you feel better. But we are already here. I spent a month off the grid. No phones, no internet, cash only. I drifted between motels, gas stations, any place where people wouldn't ask too many questions. But every night I felt it. That pressure in the air, that gnawing, gut-deep sensation that something was watching me. Not someone, something. I started noticing patterns. People smiling for too long. Strangers repeating the exact same phrase, in the exact same tone, across different cities. Every time I turned on the news, I saw familiar faces. Faces that shouldn't exist anymore. Dr. Keller was alive again, not a look-alike. Him. Same voice, same mannerisms, same cold, measured way of speaking. He was standing on a podium in Washington, wearing a government ID badge, giving a speech about new advancements in AI research. I almost laughed, because that's how they do it, isn't it? They don't come in guns blazing. They don't invade. They become us. They slip into the cracks of reality, like they were always here, rewriting the past as easily as breathing. And nobody questions it, because the moment you start questioning it, they notice you. I tried to warn people. I really did. But have you ever tried to tell someone that the world they live in isn't real anymore? That the people they love might not be people at all? They look at you like you're insane. And maybe I am. But insanity doesn't explain the things I've seen. Insanity doesn't explain why, when I looked up old photos of the astronauts, their faces had changed. Their records were still there. Same names, same credentials. But the faces in the photographs weren't the same people I saw go to the moon. It was like someone had edited history itself, piece by piece, replacing it so cleanly that even the internet couldn't keep a trace of the truth. And the worst part, I recognized the new faces, because they were the same ones I had seen in the shadows of the facility just before it burned down. I finally cracked last week. I called an old friend, someone I knew I could trust. We met in a shitty little diner off the highway, one of those places with flickering neon signs and waitresses that looked like they had seen too much life. I told him everything, and for a moment, I thought he believed me. He didn't say a word as I talked, just sat there, stirring his coffee, eyes locked onto mine. And then, he smiled. Not a normal smile. Too wide, too precise. like his skin was stretching just a little too tight around his teeth. I felt my stomach drop. I looked around the diner. Every single person was watching us. The waitress behind the counter, the trucker in the corner booth, the kid at the register, all of them staring, smiling. And in that moment, I realized I had fucked up. I ran, left everything behind, my car, my phone, my bag. I didn't stop moving until my lungs burned and my vision blurred, until I was deep in the woods, miles away from any road or town. And that's where I am now, sitting in the dark, writing this, because I know they're coming, not with weapons, not with violence. They don't need those things. They'll just walk up to me, wearing my friend's face, or my mother's, or maybe even yours. They'll look at me with eyes that aren't really eyes, and they'll say something soft, kind, reassuring, something like, "It's okay. There's nothing to be afraid of. Come with us." And I won't be able to stop myself, because I know the truth now. They don't need to kill you to replace you. They just need you to let them in. And when that happens, when the last bit of you slips away, you'll still be here. You'll still be smiling, and no one will ever know the difference. Look at the people around you. Watch how they move. Listen to the things they say. And if, just for a second, something feels off, if they smile a little too wide, if they blink just a little too slowly, run. Because if you don't, they'll take you too. I was hired on the dark web to sleep through a hub video. Whatever it wasn't a hub video. Alright, so I don't even know how to start this. I'm not some hardcore tech guy. I don't know how to hack into government databases or anything like that. I'm just a regular guy. I live in a tiny apartment, barely making enough to cover rent, and I spend way too much time online. I mean, if you're broke and bored, the internet is basically your best friend and worst enemy at the same time. A few months ago, I was in a pretty bad place financially. My job at this shady call center had just laid off half the employees, and I was one of them. My rent was due in 2 weeks, and my bank account was already in the negatives. I was desperate. So, like an idiot, I started looking up easy ways to make money online. That's how I ended up on the dark web. Now, before you say anything, I wasn't looking for anything illegal. I'd heard stories about people making quick cash doing weird gigs, like testing sketchy websites or reviewing bizarre indie films. I figured, worst case, I'd waste a few hours. But then I found the ad. It was on this forum, buried under layers of encryption. No flashy graphics, just plain text in a black chat box. $10,000 to sleep through a hub video. No questions asked. At first, I thought it was a joke, but the replies underneath were dead serious. People were asking if the gig was still open. Some guy posted a PayPal screenshot showing a payment of $10,000. Another said he did it and had weird dreams, but no regrets. I hesitated. $10,000 to sleep through a video. What did that even mean? Were they gonna hypnotize me? Flash subliminal messages? It was weird, sure, but I needed the money. So, like a complete idiot, I clicked on the contact link. The guy who responded went by the username Red Room Host. He didn't waste time. "You interested in the job?" I replied. "Yeah. What do I have to do?" His response was almost immediate. "Simple. You watch the video. You fall asleep. You get paid. No skipping. No closing your eyes early. You must fall asleep naturally. You'll receive a package in the mail with a device to monitor your sleep. Payment is sent within 24 hours after confirmation. I sat there for a minute, just staring at the screen. The whole thing felt off, but the replies from other users, the proof of payments, it looked legit, and I needed the money. "I'm in," I typed. The next day, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a small, weird-looking headset, a note with a link to a private dark website, and instructions. Put on the headset. Click the link at exactly 2 a.m. Keep your eyes open until you naturally fall asleep. Do not remove the headset until the video ends. I should have backed out right then, but $10,000 is $10,000. That night, I set an alarm for 1:55 a.m., grabbed a Red Bull to stay awake for as long as I could, and clicked the link. The site was almost empty. No branding, no menus, just a single video file labeled watchme.mp4. I hesitated for a second, then pressed play. At first, it was just static. Faint whispering sounds, like voices buried under white noise. My room suddenly felt colder, but I told myself it was just my imagination. Then the screen changed. I was looking at a dark, empty room. The only light came from a single flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. In the middle of the room was a bed, just a normal cheap-looking mattress with white sheets. And then I saw him. There was a man standing in the corner, not moving, just standing there, barely visible in the shadows. His head was tilted slightly, like he was listening for something. I stared at the screen, waiting for something to happen. Then, slowly, he turned his head, straight at me. I felt my stomach drop. It wasn't a normal turn. It was slow, unnatural, like he was realizing I was watching him. His eyes, I swear to God, his eyes weren't reflecting the light. They were just empty. My breathing got heavier. I tried to shake it off. "It's just a creepy video," I told myself. "Just fall asleep and get the money." The man stepped closer. I didn't even see him move. 1 second, he was in the corner. The next, he was closer to the bed, still staring. Then closer. Then closer. Each time the screen flickered, he was nearer to the camera, his face still unreadable in the shadows. And then, just as I felt my body starting to freeze up, the video glitched. For a split second, I saw something else. Something horrible. It wasn't just a bed anymore. There was a person tied down, wrists and ankles strapped to the frame. The sheets were soaked. Blood. And the man, he was holding something. A knife. No, not a knife. A bone saw. The video flickered again, and the bed was empty. The man was gone. I wanted to shut it off. My whole body was screaming at me to turn it off, but I couldn't move. My eyelids felt heavy. My body was sinking. I was falling asleep, even though I was terrified. I fought it, but the more I struggled, the weaker I felt. I wasn't just tired. I was being forced to sleep. The last thing I remember before blacking out was the man stepping closer and whispering something. "You shouldn't have watched." I woke up 11 hours later. My phone was dead. My laptop screen was black. My body felt heavy, like I'd been drugged. And then I noticed something. The package the headset came in. It was on my desk, but it wasn't empty anymore. Inside was a single Polaroid. It was a picture of me, asleep in my bed, and standing in the corner of my room was him. I don't remember getting out of bed. I don't remember reaching for the Polaroid. All I remember is sitting there, staring at it, my hand shaking so hard the photo nearly slipped through my fingers. It was real. The picture wasn't some weird hallucination or a trick of the light. It was a clear, high-quality Polaroid. Me, lying in my bed, completely unconscious, and in the corner of my room, half hidden in the darkness, was him. The same man from the video, same blank expression, same tilted head, like he was studying me. Only this time, it wasn't a screen. It wasn't pixels on my laptop. He had been here, in my room, while I was asleep. My stomach flipped. I scrambled out of bed so fast, I knocked over the nightstand, my lamp crashing to the floor. I spun around, scanning every inch of the room, my chest so tight I could barely breathe. The closet door was open just a crack. The bathroom door was half shut. Every shadow suddenly felt too deep, too dark. I grabbed my phone. Dead. Laptop. Black screen. That's when I noticed the time. 4:23 p.m. I'd been asleep for over 14 hours. My body felt heavy, like I'd been drugged. My thoughts were a tangled mess of confusion and raw stomach-turning fear. What the hell happened to me? Did I actually watch that video last night? Or was I losing my mind? Then I saw the headset. It was still on my desk, sitting next to the Polaroid. But now, it was broken. Not just broken, smashed. The plastic was cracked down the middle, wires spilling out like torn veins. Someone, or something, had destroyed it while I was asleep. That's when the nausea hit. I barely made it to the bathroom before throwing up. My head was pounding, my vision swimming in and out of focus. Every part of me felt wrong, like something had crawled inside my skull and was still there, digging its way in deeper. I turned on the faucet, splashing cold water on my face. That's when I noticed something else. There were scratches on my arm. 3 long, thin scratches, running from my wrist up to my elbow. Not deep enough to bleed, but fresh, like something had grabbed me in my sleep. I staggered back, my pulse hammering in my ears. My reflection in the mirror looked pale, sickly. My eyes were bloodshot, my pupils dilated, and then my phone buzzed. I nearly jumped out of my skin. The screen was still dead, but the notification sound had gone off, like a ghost signal. Slowly, with shaking hands, I held down the power button. It turned on immediately, and there was a new message waiting for me. No number, no contact name, just a single text. You're awake. Good. I dropped the phone like it burned me. This wasn't a scam. This wasn't some weird internet experiment. Someone was watching me. I didn't even bother putting on shoes. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, and bolted out of my apartment, my heart slamming against my ribs. I needed people, lights, noise. I needed out. I ended up at a Starbucks a few blocks away. The place was packed. Normal people sipping coffee, staring at their laptops, scrolling through TikTok. I sat in the corner, my back against the wall, where I could see every exit. My phone was still in my hand, the screen dim, waiting. I wanted to throw it away, smash it like the headset, but part of me knew it wouldn't matter. Whoever sent that text, they already knew where I was. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the screen, waiting for another message. It never came, but something was wrong. I could feel it, like that feeling you get when someone is watching you, that creeping sensation crawling up your neck. I glanced around. Normal people. A girl in a university hoodie, a businessman with AirPods, a guy in a security uniform. Then I saw him, outside, across the street, just standing there, half hidden behind a lamppost. A man in a black hoodie, motionless, his face hidden in the shadows. I froze. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't walking. He was just standing there, facing the Starbucks, facing me. I looked down at my phone, pretending to check my notifications. My hands were shaking. When I glanced back up, he was closer, on my side of the street now, still standing still. I felt like I was going to be sick again. I stood up so fast, my chair scraped against the floor, making people look. I forced myself to act normal, heading for the door. Don't run, just walk, just... My phone buzzed again. Another message. Go home. Now. I swallowed hard. My entire body was screaming at me to not go home, to get as far away from my apartment as possible. But then another text. If you don't go home, you'll see what happens to the ones who don't listen. Attached was a photo. I didn't want to open it. I opened it. I wish I hadn't. It was another Polaroid, but this one wasn't of me. It was of a girl. She was tied to a bed, wrists and ankles bound, her mouth gagged with a strip of duct tape, and standing in the corner of the room was him, the same man, the same empty stare. Only this time, he was holding the saw. Blood was already splattered on the sheets, on his hands. I clamped a hand over my mouth, my vision spinning. The walls of the Starbucks suddenly felt too close, the air too thin. I stumbled out onto the sidewalk, gasping for breath. I needed to think. I needed to... Hey! I jumped so hard I almost screamed. A guy had walked up next to me. Early 20s, scruffy beard, worn-out hoodie. You okay, man? He frowned, glancing at my shaking hands. You look like you've seen a ghost. I stared at him, my brain not fully processing his words. Then quietly, he said, You watched the video, didn't you? My breath caught in my throat. Everything around me, the street, the cars, the people, it all faded into the background. This guy, he knew. He saw my reaction. He nodded to himself, as if confirming something. You need to listen very carefully, he muttered. You're already dead. You just don't know it yet. My blood turned to ice. What? How do I know? He gave a hollow, humorless chuckle. Then he rolled up his sleeve. 3 long, thin scratches ran down his arm, exactly like mine. Then he leaned in and whispered something that made my skin go cold, something I still hear in my head. I watched it too, and now, he's coming for you. I swear to you. The second those words left his mouth, something inside me broke. I watched it too, and now he's coming for you. I didn't know what to say. I just stood there, staring at this guy, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. His eyes were hollow, his skin pale, like he hadn't slept in weeks. He looked wrong, not sick, not exhausted, like something had already hollowed him out from the inside. I finally found my voice. What the fuck are you talking about? The guy glanced around, his hands twitching at his sides. We can't talk here. He's watching. I turned, my heart skipping a beat. The man in the hoodie, the one who had been standing outside Starbucks, was gone. But that didn't make me feel any safer. Come on, the guy said, before it's too late. Everything in me screamed not to follow him. I didn't know him. I didn't trust him. But at the same time, something told me he was the only person who knew what was happening. And if I didn't listen, I thought about the photo, the girl, the blood. I followed him. We ended up at a shitty, run-down motel on the edge of town, the kind of place where the walls were yellowed with cigarette smoke, and the carpet felt sticky under your shoes. He unlocked a room, 213, and ushered me inside. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not rotten, not quite, but stale, thick, like something had been in here for too long, without leaving. The second thing I noticed was the walls. Every inch of them was covered in photos, newspaper clippings, scribbled notes in black marker, Polaroids taped together in clusters, like some kind of obsessive crime board. My stomach dropped, because I saw my face in one of them, a photo of me, asleep in my bed, the same one that had been left in my apartment, but underneath it, in that same jagged black marker, someone had written, "Marked." I turned to him, my hand shaking. "What the fuck is this?" He didn't answer. Instead, he walked over to a battered nightstand, pulled open the drawer, and took something out. A stack of Polaroids. I didn't want to see them. I knew I didn't. But he shoved them into my hands anyway. I flipped through them, one by one. Photo 1, a girl, asleep in her bed. Photo 2, the same girl, now with a man standing in the corner. Photo 3, the girl, awake, screaming. Photo 4, blood, everywhere. Photo 5, the man sitting on the bed, holding something in his lap. I squinted, trying to make it out. Then I realized it was her head. I dropped the photos, stumbling back, bile rising in my throat. I don't... He grabbed my wrist, squeezing so tight it hurt. "They don't all die the same way," he muttered. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Some get gutted, some get burned, some just vanish. But they all have one thing in common." I didn't want to ask. I really didn't. But the words came out anyway. "What?" He leaned in, his breath stale, his pupils blown wide, like he had been awake for days. They all watched the video. My vision swam. My pulse pounded in my ears. No, this wasn't happening. This was some fucked up joke, some elaborate prank. But then I looked at the walls again, at the dozens of faces staring back at me. Some of them had red X's over them. Some had the word "missing" scrawled underneath. And some had nothing, like no one ever found what was left of them. I forced myself to breathe. "What the fuck is he?" The guy let go of my wrist and took a step back. "You don't want to know." "I already know. I saw him." He shook his head. "You think you saw him, but that wasn't him." My stomach twisted. "Then who?" "That was just a glimpse. A shadow." He licked his lips. His hands were still twitching, like he was trying to hold himself together. "The real one. You don't ever want to see him. Not fully." I felt like I was going to pass out. I tried to focus, to steady my breath. "There has to be a way to stop this," I said. He laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "There isn't." Silence. Thick. Suffocating. Then he muttered, "You should have never taken the job." I felt something inside me snap. "You think I don't fucking know that?" My voice cracked, my throat raw. "But I did. And now I need to know how to stop it." For the first time, his expression changed. Pity. Real, genuine pity. "You don't," he whispered. "You run." Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. Like he knew running wouldn't save me. Like he knew nothing would. I shook my head. "I can't. He already found me." The guy inhaled sharply, his hands curling into fists. Then, slowly, he rolled up his sleeve. The scratches on his arm were deeper now. Red. Raw. Like they had been reopened from the inside. My stomach turned. "What?" He grabbed me by the collar, pulling me close. His breath was hot, frantic. "He's coming." A loud crash outside. We both froze. Then, footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, getting closer. The guy's grip on me tightened. "You need to run. Now." And then, a knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the door. The guy's face went pale. I took a step back. My whole body was trembling. Another knock. Boom, boom, boom. The door shook. I turned to run, but the guy grabbed my arm. His nails dug into my skin. His mouth opened. But before he could say anything, the door burst open, and standing in the doorway, tall, silent, unmoving, was him. His head tilted slightly, those black, empty eyes locked onto mine, and then, slowly, he smiled. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I just stood there, frozen, as he took his first step into the room, and behind him, in the dark hallway, something else moved, something bigger, something with too many limbs, and then everything went black. I woke up to screaming. It wasn't my own. The motel room was wrong. The air felt thick, wet, like I was breathing through a damp cloth. The lights flickered overhead, casting warped, shifting shadows on the stained walls. Then I realized. The guy was gone. The walls were empty. No Polaroids, no newspaper clippings. The entire room was stripped bare, like no one had ever been there in the first place. Except for one thing. There was something on the bed. I didn't want to look. Every inch of me screamed not to look. But I did, and I wish I hadn't, because what was on the bed was him, or what was left of him. His body was wrong, twisted like something had broken every bone and put them back together the wrong way. His arms were stretched unnaturally long, his fingers bent at sickening angles. His face, Jesus Christ, his face. His mouth had been carved open, ripped from ear to ear, the skin peeled back like something had been trying to make him smile. And his eyes, they were gone, not gouged out, not hollow sockets, just missing, as if he had never had them to begin with. I staggered back, slamming against the wall, my entire body trembling. I could still hear the screaming, but I didn't know where it was coming from. Then something moved. Not him. The thing that had been standing behind him. In the doorway. It was still there. Watching me. Not human. Not even close. I couldn't see it fully. Not yet. But I could hear it. A sound like wet meat dragging against the floor. Like something too big to move properly, slithering its way forward. And then the lights went out. Total darkness. The screaming stopped. I don't remember running, but I must have. 1 second I was in the room. The next I was stumbling through the motel parking lot, the pavement cold and slick beneath my feet. My vision swam, my ears ringing. Then I heard it. A whisper. Right behind me. You can't wake up if you never sleep. My entire body locked up. I turned, and I saw it. Not a man, not a shadow. Something else. Something that didn't belong in this world. It stood impossibly tall. Its limbs stretched and wrong. Its hands too big. Fingers too long. Its mouth, if it even was a mouth, was just an open slit, stretching down its entire face. And inside that slit, teeth. Hundreds, maybe thousands, all grinding together like broken glass. And its eyes. It didn't have eyes, but I knew it was looking at me. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. Then, slowly, its mouth opened wider, and inside I saw faces, twisting, writhing, screaming, all of them human, all of them trapped inside it. Somewhere, deep inside my head, I heard it again, that same whisper. You can't wake up if you never sleep. Something grabbed my ankle. I fell. The asphalt ripped into my skin, my palms burning. I tried to get up, but I couldn't. Something was holding me down. I looked back, and I saw him. Not the thing, not the monster, the man, the one from the video, the one from my room. He was on the ground, half submerged in the pavement, like the earth itself was eating him alive. His hands clawed at my leg. his fingers digging into my skin, pulling me down with him, and his face. His mouth was moving, but no sound was coming out. I kicked, thrashed, fought with everything I had, but he wouldn't let go. Then, a voice, not his, not the thing's, mine. "Wake up!" The world cracked, like glass shattering. I gasped awake, my entire body convulsing. I was in my apartment, back in my bed. The morning light seeped through the blinds, cutting through the darkness like a lifeline. My sheets were soaked in sweat. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely breathe. A dream. Just a dream. But then I looked at my wrist and saw the bruises where he had grabbed me, and sitting on my nightstand was a Polaroid. My stomach dropped. I reached for it, my hands shaking. It was me, asleep in my bed, but this time there was no one in the corner, no shadow, no figure, just a single handwritten note scrawled across the bottom. "You brought it back with you. I should have run. I should have burned the photo, packed a bag, and disappeared off the grid. But I didn't. I just sat there, gripping the Polaroid, my fingers numb. My breath came in short, shallow gasps. You brought it back with you." The words bled into my brain, carving themselves deep, sinking into the marrow of my bones. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. The air in my apartment felt wrong, heavy, like I was underwater. I could hear something, not a sound, but an absence of one. A silence so deep, it felt alive. I checked my phone. 3:13 a.m. No new messages, no missed calls. But when I swiped up to unlock it, my background had changed. It was another Polaroid, but this one wasn't of me. It was my apartment door, taken from inside the apartment, and standing in the doorway was him. I dropped the phone. It hit the floor with a hollow thud. My pulse hammered in my ears, my vision swimming in and out of focus. No, this wasn't happening. I turned, half expecting to see him standing there, watching me. But the doorway was empty. The apartment was silent, except for drip, drip, a faint, wet sound coming from the hallway. I didn't want to look. I had to look. I forced myself to move. Step by step, I walked toward the hall. The closer I got, the worse the air felt. It was thick, humid, carrying a stench like rotting wood, and something else, something sweet, something dead. The sound grew louder. Drip, drip. I turned the corner and stopped. There was a puddle, a thick black puddle, spreading across the floor. It was seeping from under my bedroom door. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Slowly, I reached for the doorknob. My fingers sank into it, not like metal, not like anything solid, like flesh, like something was breathing through the door. I jerked my hand back, my stomach twisted. My skin was burning where I had touched it. Then softly, knock. I froze. Knock. Louder this time, more insistent. Then a whisper, right next to my ear. "You were never awake." My vision cracked, like a mirror shattering, and suddenly, I wasn't in my apartment anymore. I was in the motel room again, room 213. The bed was still there. So was the body, twisted, broken, the same way I had seen it before. Only this time, it wasn't the guy from before. It was me. I stumbled back, my legs nearly giving out beneath me. My own face stared back at me, frozen in a scream. My chest was caved in. My ribs were jutting out through the skin, snapped like dry twigs. My hands were twisted, fingers bent backward, and my eyes were missing. No, this wasn't real. I was in my apartment. A hand closed around my wrist. Cold, rotten, wrong. I turned, and he was there, the man. Only now, I could see his face, fully. It wasn't a face at all. It was a hole, a black, gaping void, swallowing everything around it. And inside, I saw something moving. Not just one thing. Dozens. Hundreds. Faces shifting, stretching against the darkness like they were trying to claw their way out. Some of them were screaming. Some of them were laughing. And one of them was mine. My stomach twisted, a scream clawing its way up my throat. The thing tilted its head, and then it pulled me in. I woke up, but I never really woke up. Not in the way you think, not in the way that matters, because when I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my bed. I wasn't even in my apartment. I was in a room, a dark, empty room, with a bed in the middle, a bed with someone strapped to it, and in the corner was me, watching, waiting, and then the door opened, and he stepped inside, and behind him, the hallway was endless, lined with doors, each one leading to another room, each one with another bed, each one with another person who had watched the video, and one by one, they would all wake up, just like me, and none of them would ever leave, because you can't wake up if you were never really asleep.